Folks, my name is John Price. I am a filmmaker and a student of psychology, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about what depression actually is. I mean, I know we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to be depressed by the conversation, but when you look at it mechanically, when you look at it mathematically, it's not so bad. We start to realize that we have more ability to control that feeling than we thought. Here's my punching bag. I don't know how many times I've relied on this thing to help me feel better. I've found that anger can be released productively by exercise. I've hit this thing with my fists and my legs so many times. I mean, I sat there screaming, "I hate you so much." That it was an emotional release, but it was a healthy emotional release. So, when you feel like getting angry at someone, hit the bag. This thing cost me $75, and it has been worth every penny to hit that bag. And that is one of the 8 principles of the SOAA wellness system, which we'll be talking about a little bit more. Exercise. Find something you like to do. I love kickboxing. I studied karate when I was in college, and I found that it was a great cardio workout, and I've been addicted to it ever since. It has been a fun way for me to relieve the stress of my life. And essentially, that's what the Survivors Overcoming Abuse system is about. That we as abused people have emotional scars to deal with, right? Going on a walk gets me in touch with nature. And I've got a great background here. And all these wonderful trees, and I probably walk like 5 or 6 miles a week. Sometimes 5 or 6 miles a day, whatever it takes. You know, in the in the situation where people are in a crisis situation, for example, when the police are dealing with someone, 2 people who are about to fight, they separate them. Why do they do that? Well, they do that because, A, they need some space. They have invaded each other's personal space, and when you do that, it makes someone feel uncomfortable. And if they're an emotionally immature individual, they're going to punch you, because that's how their mind responds to that stimulus. You know, the stimulus of I'm uncomfortable emotionally. Now, we don't have to, as survivors of abuse, feel uncomfortable emotionally all the time. That is a lie. You don't have to be depressed because someone treated you like crap for 5 months or 5 years. You don't ever have to be depressed, because no one deserves to be abused. We have the power of positive thinking. That's probably the most important principle, and we'll get into that later. But it makes the difference between someone who is a leader and someone who's a follower. Someone who spends their life making a difference and someone who spends their life making excuses. You have to ask yourself, which one do you want to be? The one who makes a difference, or the one who makes excuses? Because I guarantee you, the world is full of people who make excuses, who are looking for somebody else to blame because they just don't like their life. Their life sucks. We know those people. We have lots of names for them, many of which I will not say here. But they don't realize that you can choose to be happy. That there is a space between stimulus and response, like we talked about. And even though you're held responsible by humanity, by God, by the law, for that space, that doesn't really necessarily mean that the account that you give for the space between stimulus and response is negative. That I like the idea that I'm also held accountable for all the good that I do, instead of just obsessing over the negative. What most people don't realize is that it's human nature to do that. It really is. It's human nature to focus on the negative. I like thinking of the the ZZ Top song. I'm here walking in the forest. That's one of the great trails that wraps around the house. Anyway, the ZZ Top song called Dirty Laundry, right? It goes on and on and off about how we love talking about other people's weaknesses because it makes us feel better about ours, right? Time and time again, one of the biggest signs of depression is that we're looking for someone to blame because we're tired of blaming ourselves. We're tired of sitting there and saying, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm not going to accomplish anything in my life simply because I have these weaknesses, or because I've made a series of choices that have led to a pattern of bad behavior, which we call a habit, and I don't feel like I can change that. I can't stop dating jerks if you're a woman. I can't stop yelling at my wife. I can't stop spending too much money. You know, that we feel defined by our bad habits, and that can lead to depression. And most of the time, it usually does. Habits start with our thoughts, okay? If we sit there and just assume that we're going to fail before we even try, then we've already set that plan to fail in motion. Okay, in our minds, we have mapped out the blueprint for failure. We don't realize how powerful our minds really are. And then when it comes to change, we are in charge. Most of the world wants us to think that somebody else is to blame because it's easier, because it sells. Hey, if you just have this product or this service, then, you know, it'll take those bad habits away from you. No, it won't. It'll just replace them with other bad habits. It's a lie. The real hope is that anybody can change something they don't like about themselves. Even if that thing they don't like about themselves is that they are too negative, that they are too critical of other people. When you start to look at human beings in terms of having great potential for good and evil, and stop just stereotyping people, it's a lot easier to stop stereotyping yourself. That's part of the problem, is when we stereotype ourselves, we are demeaning ourselves. You know, I grew up thinking that being a scientist means I'll never be good at sports and I'll never be able to have a girlfriend. You know, the only thing I'm good at is stuff that most people don't understand. Stuff that doesn't make me strong. Stuff that doesn't make me a man. Nothing could be further from the truth. Sports, it was easy. Physics and psychology. Once I figured that out, it was not so hard. That there was this thing called exercise and nutrition science. And so I wasn't fat anymore. It makes a difference. There are very few things in life that science cannot explain. And that's what we're talking about here, the science of emotions. Nobody that feels like they are defined by their mistakes wants somebody else to bring out yet another mistake. Especially if it's a really big one, like, you know, I keep talking trash about other people. I can't stop gossiping, for example. What does gossip really do? We're demeaning that person, and we're also demeaning ourselves. We're the one that has to live with that stereotyping. We're the one that has to sit there and say, I believe that all filmmakers are evil, or I believe that all men are abusive. Well, then you aren't opening your mind to the fact that that's not true. Everybody has a choice on how they want to live. Or even something as simple as being an overly religious person and saying, I believe that the only reason for depression is sin. Well, that's very narrow-minded and ignorant. Depression is a part of the human condition. It's not because of sin. Now, there's so many times in my life where I felt depressed simply because I didn't have any caring friends.